"Oh," I said, "let's see. I think we'll have more animals soon." And I was right. "We must make a garden too," I said. "A big garden," said Fritz. "What have we got? Plants and seeds from the ship and potatoes, and perhaps we can find other plants on the island that we can grow in our garden." "Yes," I said, "but we must build a wall around the garden. We don't want the animals to eat the plants. We'll use bamboo." "Oh, that's a lot of work," said Ernest. Ernest was lazy and didn't like work. "There's one thing that you haven't told me," said my wife. "You've told me what we'll be able to eat next year, but what are we going to eat now?" "Ah," I said, "we haven't got any potatoes, but there are wild plants. I'm sure that there are sweet potatoes on this island." The next morning we all went out and looked for sweet potatoes. For some time we didn't find anything. Then Fritz found a plant and called me. "Is this a sweet potato?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "it is." We looked around and found more. Back at the treehouse, my wife cooked the sweet potatoes. They tasted like potatoes, but not as nice. Then she made some of the potatoes into a sort of bread. It was quite hard, but good. Chapter 11. The Garden. We got up very early in the morning. We wanted to start work on our garden before the weather got hot. Fritz, Ernest, and I took our tools. Jack had a fork, but he wasn't really old enough. We all started to work. After a time, when we were quite tired, I said, "Let's see what the animals left on the ground last night. That'll be very good for the earth in the garden." We went to look. "The pig! The pig's gone!" Jack cried. It was true. The pig was nowhere near the treehouse. "We can't do anything about that," I said. "Perhaps she'll come back again." "You said she," said Jack. "Yes, of course. I think she's going to be a mother. Perhaps she's gone away to the forest to have her babies there. Then she'll come back, I hope." We went back and worked again in the garden. We were all very tired when it was time for the evening meal. We had fish and sweet potatoes. "Now," I said, "we must work in the garden again tomorrow and plant all the seeds from the ship. Then we'll put bamboo around our garden and make huts for the animals." "We must make a big hut for the pig," said Jack, "if she has a lot of little pigs." "Now go to bed," I said to the boys. "Be ready to work hard tomorrow. First, we'll get the bamboo." "How will we carry a lot of bamboo across the ground?" asked Jack. "We can't use the sledge. Can the donkey pull it?" "No," I said. "We won't go to the place where we found bamboo before. We'll go to a different place. Then we'll be able to bring it here more easily." "Oh," said Jack. "Is there an easier way?" "Yes," I said. "We'll go up the river. We'll cut the pieces of bamboo and pull them to the river. Then the river can carry them down to our treehouse." "Ah," said Jack. "Yes, that'll be the best way." Chapter 12. Buffaloes and Other Animals. We left the next morning to get bamboo for our garden and for animal huts. My wife and the 4 boys came with me and the 2 dogs, Turk and Flora. We also took the donkey. We needed it to pull the bamboo to the side of the river. It was our first visit to this part of the island, so we took our guns with us. The dogs were a mistake, but the guns weren't. We went up the river and found a lot of bamboo. We cut it and tied it together, and the donkey pulled it to the river. Then we had a meal and rested. Jack went for a walk. After a time he came back and said, "Father, there's a big field over there, and there are 10 or 15 large horses in it." I said, "Jack, there aren't any horses in this place." "There are," he said. "Come and see." When we came out of the trees, we saw a lot of buffaloes. We went nearer and nearer until we were about 130 feet away. The buffaloes stood and looked at us with their big round eyes. They didn't seem to be angry or afraid. I could see 2 young buffaloes. Then Turk and Flora began to jump up and down, making a lot of noise. The buffaloes became angry and they came towards us. We were in great danger, but Fritz and I both used our guns. One of the buffaloes fell dead, and the others turned and ran away. We were lucky to escape so easily. I said to Fritz and Ernest, "Come and catch those 2 young buffaloes. The dogs have pushed them into the trees. We must take them with us." We put ropes around their necks, and they came with us without any trouble. We hurried away as fast as we could. "Now," I said, "we'll leave the bamboo until tomorrow, but the young buffaloes will be very useful. We'll give them milk from the goat." The goat gave the young buffaloes her milk. "But," said Jack, "there won't be much milk for us." "No," I said, "but soon we'll have as much milk as we need." "You seem very pleased about the young buffaloes," said Ernest. "Yes, I am," I answered, "because now I can see an answer to 2 big problems." "Oh," said Ernest, "what problems?" "These," I answered. "When the goat doesn't give us any more milk, we won't have any, but these 2 young buffaloes will grow up and they'll have babies, so we'll have more and more buffaloes and plenty of milk. Buffalo milk is very good. We can make butter from it and perhaps cheese too." "And what was the other problem?" asked Fritz. "The other problem," I answered. "You remember the plow that we brought from the ship? I didn't know how we could pull it. A buffalo is very strong, and the buffaloes can pull the plow for us. So now we have a plow, and we have milk." "Not yet," said Ernest. "No, not yet," I answered. "But next year. We mustn't think only of today. We must think of future years." The next day, we went back and cut up the dead buffalo. We brought a lot of the meat back and put it into barrels with salt. Now, I thought, we'll have food in the winter. We also put the bamboo in the river, and the river carried it down to a place near the treehouse. We pulled it to the treehouse and started to put it around our garden. Some days later, when the garden was finished, I said, "Now we must begin to make huts for the animals." "We'll only need 3 huts," said Ernest. "Why only 3 huts?" I asked. "We need 1 for the buffaloes, 1 for the goats, and another for the sheep," said Ernest. "And perhaps we should make a house for the chickens." "But," I said, "the donkey and the pig need huts too." "Oh," said Ernest, "the pig's gone, and today the donkey's gone too." "Gone?" I said. "Yes, I can't see it anywhere, and the pig went days ago." "Yes," I said, "but I hope they'll come back. We'll make huts for all of them and hope." We were sitting at breakfast a few days later when Fritz said, "Something's moving in those tall grasses. I'll get my gun." He ran and got his gun. "Wait," I said. "Don't shoot. Let's see what it is." Jack said, "I'll go round behind it and look. If it's dangerous, I'll run away." So Jack moved very quietly. He was very good at that because he often followed birds with his bow and arrow. The thing came nearer, and then out came our pig with 6 little ones. "At last," I said. "We're all very glad to see you, Mrs. Pig, and your house is ready for you." So we pushed the pig and her 6 babies into their hut. Then Franz called to me. "Look," he cried, "Flora's had 6 babies too." So now we had 8 dogs and 7 pigs. "Now where's our donkey?" I said. One morning we were planting potatoes in the garden when we heard a strange noise. "What's that?" I said. "What sort of animal is making that noise?" The dogs heard it too. They looked ready for a fight. We all looked around. We couldn't see anything, but the noise continued. It came nearer and nearer, and our dogs became angrier and angrier. I tied them to a tree. Then Fritz put down his gun and started to laugh. "I can see it," he said. "It's our donkey. He's come back." There he was, and then we saw that he wasn't alone. Our donkey was bringing another animal with him, very similar to a donkey but smaller. "That," I said to Jack in earnest, "is probably a kind of wild donkey. Now don't make a sound. Fritz and I will try to catch her." Fritz moved towards our donkey, holding some salt in his hand. Our donkey loved salt. He came to Fritz, and the wild donkey came a little closer too. Then, when she was near enough, I put a rope over her head from behind her. She fought against us, but at last we were able to tie her up. I said, "Perhaps the wild donkey will have babies. It will be easier to teach her if she does, and she'll be useful to us." And that is what happened in the end. The chickens were sitting on eggs, and soon we had 40 little ones. So now we had a lot of animals to feed. We had the donkey and the wild donkey, 2 buffaloes, the goats, the pigs, the dogs, the sheep, and the monkey. I said, "We must work very hard and get food for all these animals. The rainy season is coming." So we brought the tent from the beach and filled it with dry grass. We got sweet potatoes and coconuts and put them in a dry place at the foot of the tree. Chapter 13. Winter. There were dark clouds in the sky, and the sea was stormy. I looked out to sea and thought, "The sea has finally broken up our ship. There will be more wood on the beach, and this rough sea will come up to our boat on the beach." "Boys," I said, "we must pull our boat high up on the beach. We don't want the sea to carry it away, and we must turn it over so it doesn't fill with water." We went down to the beach and pulled the boat up high on the sand and turned it over. Then Ernest pointed and said, "What's that thing there, that square thing?" I looked and saw a big box. It was nearly covered with sand. We uncovered it and opened it, and it was full of a sailor's clothes. The clothes were very wet and salty from the seawater. "We can wash them in the river and dry them," I said. "They'll be too big for us," said Jack. "They're too big for Fritz or Ernest." "Yes," I said. They'll be too big for you, but you'll be glad when your other clothes have got wet in the rain." Then I thought, now winter's coming. What do we need? Dry firewood for my wife to cook with under the tree house. We didn't, of course, cook in the tree house because of the wooden floor. So we found a lot of firewood and put it at the foot of the tree under the tree house. Then I thought, in the stormy weather, we won't be able to go far from our house to get food. We must be sure that we have a lot of food in or near the house. Then we can use that when the weather's very bad. We've got barrels of salt meat and buffalo meat. I hope it will keep well. We can't get any more salt. The sea was now coming up over the rocks, and there was no sunshine to dry the salt. My thoughts continued. We've got eggs, of course, from our chickens. Perhaps we can catch fish with the fishing line from the ship, but that's not easy when the sea is very stormy. We've got sweet potatoes and a lot of coconuts. The goats will give us a little milk, and there's plenty of dry grass for our animals. Now I said to my family, we've got a good house and plenty of food, so we're ready for the winter. That's what I thought, but I was very wrong. The next few months were probably the unhappiest months that I have ever known in all my life. We had 4 enemies: the rain, the wind, the cold, and the shorter days. The days were not much shorter, but we had to spend a lot of time inside the house because of the bad weather. The rain came down like a river from the sky. It rained nearly all day and all night. There were only a few days when it stopped. Most of the land was under water. The river was too big to cross, and our bridge was broken. Luckily, our garden was on higher ground, and our plants were beginning to come through. The wind was very strong. When we made our tree house, I didn't think about the wind. If a house is built on the ground with good walls and a low roof, the wind will pass over it. The house is safe. But when a house is built up in a tree, the wind goes up into it. The roof of our house was made of sailcloth. When it rained, there were deep pools of water on the roof. The water ran over the sides onto the floor. Then the strong wind pushed the sailcloth up, and a river of rain came down into the room. The days were not as hot as before, and the nights were the same, sometimes even cold. We sat all day in wet clothes, and we couldn't dry them. In the evenings, we didn't know how to keep warm. We put stones on the floor of our tree room and lit a fire on them, but soon the room was full of smoke, and we were afraid of a fire. We couldn't get the smoke out of the room. We couldn't make a hole in the roof because of the rain. When the sun went down, darkness came suddenly, but even in the daytime, the room was quite dark. We had no light. We burned small pieces of wood, giving a little light, but that wasn't enough. So at night, we sat around in our wet clothes, very cold in the darkness. There was nothing to do except sleep. "We can't continue like this," I said. "We must go down and live at the foot of the tree. We'll put a sailcloth over this floor. Then there will be 2 roofs, the roof in the tree and the roof on this floor. Then we'll be dry down there." We built 2 walls at the foot of the tree. The animals' huts made the 3rd wall, and the tree was the 4th wall. We made a hole in the floor of the upstairs room for the smoke from our fire. Now the rain couldn't come straight down onto the fire. We were more comfortable in this lower room, but the smell of the animals came in from the huts, and that was terrible. After a time, we began to have problems with our food. The buffalo meat went bad because there wasn't enough salt in the barrels. Oh, why didn't I think about that before? We needed a lot of salt to keep our food fresh through the bad months of the year. We killed some of the older chickens and ate them. Then, when the weather was better, the boys were able to go out fishing or shooting with their bows and arrows. They brought in a little fish and meat. We had sweet potatoes, but cooking was very difficult. When the weather was good, my wife made enough sweet potato bread for a few days, but it wasn't very good. We didn't have enough food for the animals. We killed 4 of the young dogs, leaving only Turk and Flora and 2 of their babies. We had to find food for the goats, the sheep, and the buffaloes. We couldn't give them enough food in their huts, so we moved them out into the forest. We put coconut shells around their necks so we could hear them. Then we put a little food in their huts each night, so they wanted to come back home. Chapter 14. The Cave House. We were very pleased when the storms ended. After those long weeks of rain, the sun shone again. We came out from our dark, smelly room and looked up at the bright sun. Around us, the grass was green, and flowers were coming through. In our garden, the plants were coming up very well, but the birds saw them too. So Jack guarded them with Flora's help and kept the birds away. We also put fishing lines across the plants to protect them from those little thieves. We hung up our clothes in the sunlight to dry them. Then we started work on the treehouse. In a few days, we were able to leave our room at the foot of the tree and go back to our bright and happy home. "I can't live through another winter like that," said my wife. "It will kill me. I'm sure that the first men, thousands of years ago, didn't live in trees like monkeys. They lived in caves, and we must find one too." I knew that she was right. I went out and walked along the coast and looked at the hills near the sea. Some came straight down to the beach. Those were possible places for caves. I walked a long way, but I couldn't see any big ones. I needed a large cave for my family. I went back and told my wife and the boys the caves weren't large enough for us. "So," said Fritz, "if the caves aren't big enough, we must make one bigger." "You can try," I said, "but the rock's very hard. I don't know if it's possible. I'll take you to the best cave that I found above the beach. It was probably made by the sea, but the sea's gone down and left it in the side of the hill. Bring the tools, and we'll try." So we went to the cave. We worked for a week, but we only made the cave 6 feet deeper. The rock was very hard. I thought about using gunpowder, but gunpowder was too important for us. I didn't know what to do. "Shall we stop?" I asked Fritz. "Shall we think of another idea?" "I think," said Fritz, "that the rock is getting softer. This piece here seems softer." Jack was the smallest, so he was working at the lowest part of the rock. One morning he cried out, "I've done it! I've done it! I've made a hole right through the rock!" "Don't be so silly," said Fritz. "I don't believe you." "But I have," said Jack. "I have." Fritz went to look. He soon came back saying, It's true, Father. Jack's right. I can't understand it. Jack has made a hole in the rock, and there's nothing behind it. I was very surprised. I took a long piece of bamboo and put it through the hole. Yes, I said, there's nothing behind there. Let's make the hole bigger, said Fritz. Then one of us can go through. I said, that's dangerous. If the hole's very deep, you'll fall. We must be very careful. Let's make the hole a little bigger. Then I can put my head in and look. So we made the hole bigger, and I put my head in. Suddenly I felt very ill. I moved away. You mustn't go into the cave, boys, if it's a cave, I said. The air's really bad and dangerous. I'm sure you can die in there. First, we must drive out the bad air. How can we do that? Asked Fritz. We must light a fire, I replied. So we put burning grass and sticks into the hole, but the fire went out immediately. Perhaps, said Ernest, if we light a fire just in front of the hole, the hot air will pull the cold air out of the cave. Yes, that's possible, I said, but I think that will be slow and perhaps dangerous. I think this time we should use some of our gunpowder. So I took some coconut shells, tied some rope around them, and filled them with gunpowder. Then I lit one and threw it quickly into the cave. There was a very loud noise, and the bad air came out with the smoke. I did the same with 2 more coconut shells, and then we tried to light a fire again. This time the fire burned. It didn't burn very well, but the smoke and hot air came out through the hole, and soon the fire was burning better. At last, it began to burn brightly, as brightly inside the cave as in the open air. Run to the treehouse, I said to Ernest. Bring all the small pieces of wood that we've got. We can use them as light when we go into the cave. While he was gone, we made the mouth of the cave bigger. Then we could see the walls that were nearest the doorway. Jack looked in and said, "The walls are covered with beautiful stones in lots of different colors. It's wonderful." I looked into the cave. Jack was right. The walls were covered with things that looked like stones. "That's very strange," I said. "What are they?" Then Ernest came back from the treehouse bringing the wood. I went into the cave first. I wanted to be sure that the air was good. I looked at the stones. Some were lying on the floor because of the gunpowder. I took one and tasted it. "It's salt!" "Look, boys," I cried. "We'll never have to look for salt again. Next winter we'll have plenty of salt, and we'll have meat through all the bad months." We looked around the cave. It was very big. I saw that we could make a room at one end for all our things, with a bedroom next to it. We could have another big room as a kitchen and sitting room. "But," I said, "there's one thing that we must make now. I don't think this end of the cave is very far from the outside air. I'll hit the rock inside the cave. I want you, Fritz, to go outside and listen. Tell me where you hear me most clearly. Put a stick there to show the place." So Fritz went out, and I started to knock on the inside of the cave wall in different places. After a time, he came back and said, "I found the best place. I can hear you quite well." "Ah," I said, Then we'll make a hole through there from the outside. We need fresh air in the cave. It'll be hard work, but we must do it." It was hard work, but after 2 days, Fritz was able to put bamboo through the hole. The other end of it came into the cave. Then we made the hole bigger from inside the cave. "Now," I said, "we can make a fireplace with a hole for the smoke." So we started work. Using stones and earth, we made a good fireplace with a hole for the smoke. "Now," I said, "we'll see if this idea really works." So we lit a fire, but the smoke came out into the cave. I saw that the boys were very sad. They thought that all their work was for nothing. "No," I said, "don't worry. When the hole gets warm, the air will go up it. It'll be all right. Keep the fire going for 2 days and it'll work very well." And that was what happened. On the second evening, the air began to go up the hole, and it took all the smoke out of the cave. "Now," I said, "we don't have to fear the next winter." My wife was very pleased. She said, "Now I can cook and dry your clothes, and we can sit around a nice bright fire on winter evenings. We'll be very happy." "Yes," I said, "but we'll have to do a lot more work. Next winter, we'll have more animals. We must build a farm between the treehouse and the cave. Then the animals can live there in the summer and winter." "And we'll need a lot more food," said Fritz. "Yes," I said, "we can use the plow to make fields, and we must grow lots of vegetables. To work, to work." So we all had a very busy summer. We put lots of salt meat, dried fish, and coconuts in the cave. When the end of the year came, we added potatoes and sweet potatoes. Then we made a hut at the farm and put dried grass and other food in it for the animals. We built a small hut there for someone to live in. They could look after the farm at night and drive away wild animals. "What are we going to do about clothes?" asked my wife. "The boys' clothes are in a terrible state, and the clothes from the sailor's box aren't very useful. When we found them, they were full of seawater. Now they're falling to pieces. They'll be all right for another year, but not longer. I must make cloth." "How can you make cloth?" said Fritz. "From what? We've only got 2 sheep." "There are plants," I said, "that we can use for cloth. I won't tell you about all our problems with those plants, but in the end, my wife was able to make cloth. It wasn't very good, and it wasn't very white, but she was happy. But until then, the boys wore animal skins. They caught the animals, and we now had plenty of salt, so we prepared the skins, and my wife was able to make clothes out of them. So the year passed, our second year on the island. The boys were getting big and strong. Fritz was now nearly 16, and Ernest was 14. I thought about the future. One evening I said to them, "You 2 are the oldest. Soon I'll have 2 fine, strong men to help me in our work on the island. As I become older, you'll be able to do the harder work. Jack is a quick learner, and he can help your mother. Little Franz isn't very helpful yet, but he's a good little boy and doesn't give us much trouble. Yes, we are very lucky." Chapter 15. The Canoe. As the years passed, we made our houses better. We put a wooden roof on the treehouse. The rain didn't come through in winter after that, but it still wasn't a good home for the rainy season. We also built a place in front of the cave. We could sit out there and enjoy the sea air and the sunlight. The farm became bigger and bigger. The buffaloes pulled the plow, and they gave us all our milk. We were able to make butter from it, too. We got more eggs from our chickens than we could eat in the spring and the summer. In the winter, we had just enough eggs for our needs. The wild donkey had a baby. It was very pretty, and it was easier to teach than its mother. Of course, we had problems. One morning, Jack came running back from the farm. "Oh, father, father, come and see," he cried. I went down there. Everything in the farm buildings was broken, and the plants from the fields were everywhere. Monkeys laughed at us from the trees. "Oh no," I said. "They've destroyed everything. We must be sure that this never happens again." Turk and Flora's babies were now old enough for us to teach them. We made a rule that one of us, Fritz, Ernest, or I, always slept down at the farm with the dogs. They were quick to learn about the monkeys. We showed them that they must always run after a monkey. When they did, the monkeys ran away. Soon the monkeys stopped coming to the farm. As I watched my boys grow up, I was very pleased with them. Fritz was very strong and tall. Ernest wasn't as big, and he was quieter, but he wasn't as lazy as before. He wrote down the names of all the plants on the island and drew pictures of them. He made some paper out of plants like the Egyptians many thousands of years ago. Franz was more sensible than Jack. He always did what he promised to do, but Jack was a good son too, and he did a lot of work on the farm. Franz liked helping his mother, while Jack spent more time with me. One day Fritz said to me, "I'd like to go away alone. I want to visit the parts of the island that we haven't seen. The ship's boat is too heavy for one person. I want to make a canoe." "I think we can make a canoe," I said. "I've seen canoes made from the bark of tall trees. I'll try to help you." We found a big tree, and I cut a ring round the bark at the bottom. Then I tied a rope ladder to one of the branches. I told Fritz to cut round the tree about 20 feet up from the ring. Then I made a cut from top to bottom between the two circles. We took the bark off very carefully, and it fell away in one piece. We tied pieces of bamboo to our canoe to hold it in the right shape. Then we nailed together the sides at each end of the boat. A sweet juice from one of the trees dried quickly and went hard. We used this to fill the holes. "I think," said Fritz, "that the water will come in over the front of the canoe and perhaps over the back. Perhaps we should cover those places. We can leave a place in the middle where I can sit." "Yes," I said, "you're right. We must put a light cover over it." We also found a long, flat piece of wood. Fritz could use that as a paddle to move the boat along. When the canoe was ready, we waited for a few days. Then it was dry, and we tried it in the water. At first, Fritz had problems in the canoe. It turned over, and he often fell out, but he practiced, and after a few days he was able to travel safely even in rough sea. Chapter 16. Jenny. One day, Fritz went away in his little canoe. He stayed away all day. In the evening, my wife became very worried. I'm afraid that something has happened to him, she said. We couldn't do anything, so we went to bed, but we didn't sleep very much. The next day we went up to the top of a hill, but we couldn't see him. Then Ernest pointed. "Look," he said. "Is that him?" We looked. It was Fritz in his canoe. We all ran down to the water to meet him. "Oh, Fritz!" cried his mother. "I thought you were dead." While he was having breakfast, Fritz told us his story. I've always wanted to know more about the west of the island, so I decided to look there. I took my gun and some gunpowder, a fishing line, and my knife. I came to the place where we found shellfish for the first time. I went for a swim there, and I found a lot more. I brought some up onto the beach and opened them. Inside one of them I found this. He held out his hand. In it there was a large pearl. I opened some more and I found a lot of pearls. "Look, if you make holes through them, Mother can wear them around her neck," said Jack. "No, no," said my wife. "I don't want them. Who wants to wear pearls on this island?" "Perhaps one day," I said, "a ship will come and take you home. You can sell these for a lot of money. We'll put them in a safe place." "I haven't told you the most important thing," said Fritz. "I went on farther to the west. In the evening I sat on the beach and had a meal. As I was sitting there, a big bird flew over me. It was flying very slowly, so I shot it. Then I saw why it was flying so slowly. It was hurt, and this was tied around its leg." He showed us a little piece of cloth with writing on it. I looked at the writing. "Help, sailor on Smoking Island." "The person wrote the message in blood," I said. "Yes," said Fritz, "but where is the Smoking Island? I went up the hill behind me, and I looked out to sea. There, far out at sea, there was a little smoke going into the sky. It came from a small island. I went out to the island and climbed up to the top. In a little wood I saw a small hut made of branches. In front of the hut there was a fire, and fish was cooking in a big shell. I hid behind a tree and waited. Then someone came out of the hut. She was wearing the coat of a ship's officer. She went to the fire. I came out of the trees, and she turned around. "She," I said. "Did you say she?" "Yes, it was a young woman. I told her not to be afraid. I told her about us. She can live with us, can't she? We will bring her here, won't we?" "Yes, of course we will. But tell us about her." "Her father's William Montrose, an officer who lives in India. Her mother died when she was born. Her father was going back to England in a ship with his men, so Jenny had to travel in another ship. Her ship was lost in a storm a year ago. She got away in a boat with a ship's officer and some sailors. The officer gave her his coat. He told her to watch for another ship or for land. Then another storm came. A big wave covered the boat. She doesn't know what happened after that. When she opened her eyes, she was on that little island." "How has she lived there for more than a year?" I asked. "I asked her that. She's got shellfish, and there are coconuts on the trees. She made a fishing line from her hair, and she catches small fish. She uses stones to make a fire. She's made a little hut for birds from bamboo, but she can only catch small ones. When the big bird came down on the island, it hurt its leg, so she was able to tie that piece of cloth around it with her call for help." "And the bird came to you?" "Yes," said Fritz. I sat with her and listened to her story. Then I told her to stay on the island. I promised to return as quickly as possible. I couldn't come all the way home that day. I slept on the beach and started again this morning. Can we go to Jenny today? Yes, I said. Yes, if we start immediately. I asked my wife to make preparations for Jenny. Then, taking a day's food with us, Fritz and I left in the ship's boat. Jenny was waving from the beach as we came near. We stepped out of the boat onto the beach, and she threw her arms around my neck and cried. We sailed back home along the coast. Mother and the 3 boys were waiting on the beach to meet Jenny. My wife said, "I'll have to dress you like one of my sons because these are our only clothes." Jenny had a bath and dressed in sailor's clothes. Then she joined us for a large lunch, and Jack put flowers in her hair. Perhaps my boys thought that they could teach Jenny a lot of things, but she could shoot better than they could. "My father taught me in India," she said. "She was very good at catching fish. She was able to tell Ernest the real names of many of his plants." "I learned all that at school," she told him. Very soon she and the boys were close friends. Jenny thought about her father all the time. "I'm sure that ships are looking for me," she said. Fritz said, "If a ship comes, we'll hear a gun. We'll answer with our guns, then they'll know that we're here." "A ship will come one day and take me back to father," Jenny said. "I'm very happy with you, but he's probably very sad. He doesn't know if I am alive or dead." The summer ended and the winter passed. Early one morning, Fritz went out in his canoe. He was looking for a nice big fish for our lunch. Then suddenly we saw him turn around and come back. "Quick, quick!" he cried. "There's a ship!" We ran up to the top of a hill with our guns. Bang! There was an answering shot from far away. We waited, then used the gun again, and the answer came louder and nearer. Then we saw a boat coming towards the beach. We ran down to meet it. An officer stepped out. "I am Officer Littleton," he said, "of the Unicorn. Is Miss Jenny Montrose here? Some of the sailors from her ship, the Dorcas, told me to try these islands because the ship was lost near here." "Yes," I said. "Miss Jenny Montrose is here and she's safe." He looked at me and my family and at Jenny in sailor's clothes. "But," he said. I told him my name. "And this is my wife, my sons Fritz, Ernest, Jack, Franz, and this," I said, "is Jenny, our Jenny." Chapter 17. The End. I am writing this chapter with a sad heart. The Unicorn's boat is waiting to take this story of our life here to England. There, perhaps it will become a book. Other people will learn about our beautiful island, and perhaps some will want to join us in this quiet, simple, happy life. I asked my children, "Do you want to go back to Europe, boys, or to stay here?" Ernest said, "I want to stay and learn more about the plants, but the officer must send me books." Jack and Franz were too small to go. I turned to Fritz. "And you, Fritz, do you want to go back to Europe?" He took Jenny's hand in his. "Yes," he said. "We want to go now, but we'll come back." Officer Littleton left us some things, and we gave him our pearls. "I'll send you more from Europe," he promised. "I'll sell the pearls for you to pay for them and for Fritz's school." I must stop. The boat is waiting. Goodbye, my boy. Goodbye, Jenny. Until we meet again.